First, as noted above, the RFP detailed specific requirements for the documentation in Proposal Volume 6, which included the cover letter and SF-33. With respect to the offeror's cover letter, the RFP required that the letter addresses compliance to all RFP requirements and instructions to include any exceptions to the terms and conditions of the solicitation and be signed by an officer of the offeror that is authorized to bind the offeror's company. In DSI's cover letter, the firm's chief executive officer, CEO, who signed the letter in ink wrote, "This submission addresses compliance to all RFP requirements and instructions that include any exceptions to the terms and conditions of the solicitation." We find unobjectionable the agency's assessment that DSI's cover letter failed to comply with the solicitation. In this respect, as noted, the RFP required that an offeror address in its cover letter compliance with the RFP, as well as whether the firm was taking exception to any solicitation terms. Moreover, the RFP expressly cautioned against restating solicitation requirements. The proposal should not simply rephrase or restate the government requirements, but shall provide convincing rationale to address how the offeror intends to meet these requirements. Statements such as, "The offeror understands and complies with the requirements," or paraphrasing the requirements in the RFP is considered inadequate. Despite these warnings and the clear instructions, DSI simply restated the requirement, which left the contracting officer unclear as to whether DSI complied with all of the RFP terms and conditions and whether the firm was taking exception to any terms. In this respect, DSI's cover letter did not affirmatively represent that the firm intended to comply with the solicitation requirements or unambiguously indicate that the firm did not take exception to any solicitation terms, as anticipated by the RFP. On this record, we find reasonable the agency's conclusion that DSI's cover letter failed to comply with the RFP. Next, with respect to the SF-33, the RFP required that an offeror's proposal contain a completed and signed SF-33 and a signed copy of amendment, if any. An official authorized to bind the company shall sign the SF Form 33 with blocks 12 through 18 completed. The agency assessed DSI's SF-33 as non-compliant with these instructions because the firm's SF-33, which also was being used by DSI to acknowledge the solicitation amendments, did not include an original signature. Here, the record shows that while Block 16 of DSI's SF-33 identified the firm's CEO as the person authorized to sign the offer, the SF-33 only included the typewritten name of the CEO in a cursive font in Block 17, the signature block. Notably, the form did not include the CEO's actual handwritten signature in ink or an authenticated digital signature. Nevertheless, DSI maintains that this typewritten name complied with the solicitation requirements and legally bound the company if the agency had accepted the offer. We disagree. The FAR defines signature or signed as the discrete, verifiable symbol of an individual that, when affixed to a writing with the knowledge and consent of the individual, indicates a present intention to authenticate the writing. This includes electronic symbols. Under the circumstances here, the typewritten name of the CEO in the signature block, albeit in a cursive script font, is not a signature, as contemplated by the FAR. While the use of computer font arguably resulted in an electronic symbol, the typewritten name itself did not constitute a discrete, verifiable symbol that was sufficiently distinguishable to be authenticated. That is, anyone can type a person's name. Without a signature that could be authenticated, the named individual could just as easily disavow the legal instrument on which the typed name is affixed. Further, DSI's proposal lacked any documentation that expressly authorized typewritten names to bind the company. More specifically, there is no indication in the contemporaneous record that DSI adopted the typewritten form of the CEO's name as his official signature. Indeed, Spore's concern regarding the typewritten name is particularly understandable given that the CEO's handwritten signature was used on other parts of the proposal. On this record, we find persuasive the contracting officer's concern that the government's acceptance of the proposal might not have resulted in a binding contract. Given that the CEO's typewritten name does not qualify as a signature, we see nothing unreasonable with the agency's assessment that the protesters' SF-33 failed to comply with the RFP. In this respect, an offer which is not signed, and lacks some other material indication of the offeror's intention to be bound, generally must be rejected, since the government's acceptance of the offer would not result in a binding contract without confirming the offeror's intention to be bound. In addition, where, as here, the solicitation contemplated award on the basis of initial proposals, after the established date for submitting proposals, it would have been unfair to other offers to ask a company that had submitted an unsigned proposal whether it intended to be bound by its offer. We recognize that the result here is frustrating for DSI, particularly in light of the effort that ostensibly went into preparing the firm's 500-page proposal. However, taking into consideration the numerous aspects of the proposal that were not in compliance with the RFP's clearly stated requirements, we cannot find the agency's decision to reject the proposal unreasonable. In this respect, as noted above, an offeror bears the burden of submitting an adequately written proposal, and it runs the risk that its proposal will be evaluated unfavorably where it fails to do so.